We're back here on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK CPAs and Business Consultants, and joined with my co-host Jonah Bronstein, and on the phone with us is Grant Hill, and this is a treat for us. We've been looking forward to talking to Grant about a number of things, but first thing that Grant needs to know before we bring him in is that co-host Jonah Bronstein is not only an owner of the original 1996 Grant Hill Filas, but he still wears them. He played high school basketball in them. He still wears them. If you were on the Zoom right now, Grant, he just showed him, held them up to the camera as proof. But thanks for joining us here, Grant.
Yeah, no. Thanks for having me. And maybe I can work to get Jonah a brand new pair of those 1996 Grant Hill Filas. To think that he played ball in them in high school and still wears them to this day is quite hard to imagine. But I'm impressed.
Yeah, well, these are a retro. I wore those out in high school. Me and Tupac were wearing them back in the day, but I did get the retro when they came out a year or two ago.
That's right, you and Pac, exactly. All right. Well, hey, I appreciate your loyalty. I'll just say it like that.
Jonah and Pac. I mean, the number of times they've been mentioned in the same sentence, I can't count them. So Grant, it's been an interesting NBA final. The Miami Heat come up for air in Game 3, and I think a lot of people had high expectations for them in Game 4, and a little bit of a clunker for those who were hoping for a tighter series, I think. But your thoughts on this NBA final and the strangeness of it, and the storylines that either have or have not come to fruition?
Yeah, I mean, it's been, you said strange, which I think, in a lot of ways can sort of describe this entire postseason and just this whole year, the whole year of 2020, just challenging, weird, unusual, so many words to describe it. But no, I mean, look, Miami obviously is undermanned. They miss, Goran Dragic. They miss, Bam Adebayo, although he did come back and played very well there in Game 4. But they're well coached. They're disciplined. They're in great shape. They play hard. They do everything right. When you get in the finals, though, you need a guy who can go get you a basket. And, a guy who can go put a team on his back and go get a bucket. And we saw Jimmy Butler do that in Game 3 and had sort of just a superhuman performance, had one of the greatest finals performances of all time. And that's what it took to beat the Lakers. I think that really kind of, shows just the disparity here in team and talent. Butler was unable to do that when that adjustment with Anthony Davis guarding him. He couldn't really get in the paint and use his size and bully you. So that was a great move on the Lakers' part. And the Lakers didn't really play great. I mean, Davis, until the end, offensively was not really that engaged. LeBron had a bad first half. KCP and Morris were big for the Lakers. But, the Lakers could have been beat, in that game. And so when you beat a team in the finals and you don't really play your best game, that's what you ideally want. And so, if Miami wins that, now it's a fun series. It goes to 6, possibly 7. I'd imagine now that the Lakers will take care of business here on Friday and win this series in 5 games.
Grant, if the Lakers close this out in the next game or two, it's looking like this could be the start of another Lakers dynasty. What could that or does that mean for LeBron's legacy? Is there anything more that can be added to that legacy, or how do you feel about what this title and potentially more titles means to LeBron's career?
Yeah, I'm actually of the mindset that his legacy is pretty cemented. And whether he wins, this is it, or he wins 2 or 3 more, I think it doesn't impact, what the legacy is. I mean, he's had an incredible career. He's been so productive at such a young age. A lot of records, both in the playoffs, but also in the regular season. He will break or be close to at the top. So the longevity of excellence, never having any major injuries, and being dominant for so long, that's there regardless. And you're right, this team, the way it's constructed, LeBron takes great care of himself. He also, he's so smart, has a tremendous understanding of the game. And then with a guy like Davis, he doesn't have to carry the load. He's beating you now different than how he beat you at Miami and even in Cleveland. I mean, some of those finals with the Cavs, he put up gaudy numbers. I mean, it was like a one-man show. And now he's facilitating, he's distributing. It's not as if he has to come at you and beat you every possession. He has a little bit of help. And if they're fortunate to win, that experience as a team will give them just the know-how and the confidence. So, moving forward, they got a nice, 2, 3, 4 year window where they could be, a team that's in the hunt and in the picture for finals every year.
We're in conversation with Grant Hill. He's a Hall of Famer, a 7-time All-Star, 1995 NBA Rookie of the Year, of course, a superstar at Duke, and part owner of the Atlanta Hawks, also a sports analyst NBA analyst for Turner Sports, and because you're not doing the baseball. If I say sports analyst, then you should be on with Pedro Martinez and Big Papi and those guys, earning your keep with the championship series, I guess, Grant. But and that is just a scratching the surface of what Grant does, because he is involved in so many different projects and community endeavors. Grant, I do want to ask you, because I think that your involvement as a documentary filmmaker and executive producer of many documentaries with The Last Dance that came out regarding Michael Jordan, the great multi-part documentary, the 30 for 30 series that we saw over the summer. Legacies do have a tendency to change a little bit, though. And we're talking about LeBron James's legacy being cemented, but as time goes on, I mean, there are things I guess he could do to hurt his legacy, whatever. Maybe he can't do much more to enhance it. Or also Kobe Bryant. I guess I want to ask you how you see, as time goes on, how does the answer change when people want to say who's the greatest of all time? Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. We have all the information we probably need, and yet the answer seems to shift as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a hard debate, because it is subjective, and it's hard to sort of understand what the metrics are, and a lot of it's opinion. I think you have a tremendous amount of people who are younger, who've only really seen LeBron and come of age, and during the sort of LeBron James era and reign in the NBA. And then you have older generation who maybe saw Michael in his heyday and are probably more biased towards him. So, it's one of those things where there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, we all have different opinions. And as I say in television, an opinion can never be wrong. But, I think Michael, I think regardless, I mean, I think his impact, not just on the court, but off the court. And, just his dominance, his excellence, his style, his commercial appeal, he was universal. He transcended sport in his way. And in a time where he really opened the floodgates for other athletes and athletes of color to have those type of opportunities. And LeBron James is in that same mold. And if anything, it's standing on the shoulders of a guy like Michael Jordan in terms of, that off the court stuff, taking it to a whole nother level with, various interests and things of that nature. So, that's what it's all about. The game is about evolving, as we've seen the game evolve. The players have evolved, but also I think the marketing and the branding and sort of what defines an icon in the sport is evolving too, and that's a beautiful thing to watch. Like I said, I think Michael. I think Michael for different reasons, but I know people who I love and respect who who feel the other way and feel it's LeBron. And so there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of opinion.
Grant, you played against Michael Jordan in his second prime and much of LeBron James' career in his prime. You had some really great performances against Jordan in the 90s when you were in Detroit. On the floor, how would you compare guarding them? Who was more difficult for you to cover, Jordan or LeBron? You could even throw Kobe Bryant in there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't guard Michael a whole lot. I was matched up a lot with Scotty. But Michael was relentless. He was so efficient. He beat you with his mind. He didn't take plays off. And another thing you have to factor in, and this certainly, and I think sometimes to make an argument, you put down someone else, and that by no means do I intend to do that. But there was more physicality. There was more physicality back then. You could hand check. You could, use your arms a little bit more. You could do things defensively that's not permitted in today's game. But Michael, when I went against Michael, the few times we were matched up, I was younger, I was healthy, I was, at a certain level. And then, when I got older, I played against Kobe and, certainly I was older and, had many surgeries and so was a shell of myself, and played against LeBron and had some success against LeBron on both ends of the floor. And so, for me, having seen all of them, there's a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. But Michael was, and even Kobe. I mean, Kobe, I think, has acknowledged that Michael was the greatest, and certainly an influential figure for him as a basketball player. But LeBron's different, got a different approach, different style. Certainly extremely successful, an amazing player and talent. And really one of the best to ever lace him up.
Grant, in my research, I came across a story, or I guess I should say, I heard a story. It might have been a mutual acquaintance of ours telling a story about you behind your back, but he says that there was a good story about your daughters being worried for you when you were in Phoenix and you had to guard LeBron James. And when your own flesh and blood is worried for you, does that impact your opinion on how good a player is?
And
were they right to be worried for Dad?
No, they were haters. They never really saw me in my prime. And anytime, we'd have a game, whether it was, I guess then it was against Cleveland, or we're playing the Lakers, or, if I had to match up with Carmelo or whoever I was going to guard, my one daughter was, Dad, I'm worried about you. I don't think you can guard that person. And so, it was just a little hate, but it's funny. They didn't, my oldest is 18 now and she's off in college, as a freshman, but, she didn't see that version of me. She saw me, in Phoenix and more so as a role player, as a veteran, and so, every once in a while in the last 5-6 years, she'll go on YouTube and, she'll look up a clip or a highlight and she's like, man, Dad, you actually were pretty good. And, so finally I'm getting some love in my own house.
We're in conversation with Grant Hill, NBA analyst for Turner Sports, among a gazillion other things that you know him for over the years. And I mentioned earlier, documentarian, and you've put together a long list of great sports documentaries. And I wanted to ask you this, maybe it has to take a leap with me as I ask this question, Grant. There are two 30 for 30s in which the main character was shown to be a jerk. We're talking about The Last Dance. I think a lot of that, even though it was produced by Michael Jordan, maybe we didn't see the full extent of his teammates and the people around him, that this guy was driven and it was maybe part of his personality that he needed to have that type of personality. And then, of course, I Hate Christian Laettner. Christian being a Western New Yorker. I wanted to ask if there's a comparison. Obviously, I'm not comparing their legacies or how they were as a player. but a certain mental attitude. Is there a comparison to be made there of a player who needs to get into that mindset of just being a jerk and pushing himself on the opposition?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'll say this. I think the perception of Christian, particularly from that movie, it wasn't entirely fair. He was competitive, and he was really, everything, ping pong, boxing, bowling, everything was a competition with him. And he had an edge about him. And I think that, that's in part what made him great. He wasn't necessarily the best athlete. He was, he didn't wow you with his physical attributes. So, but he was so darn competitive. And it's funny, that documentary, I Hate Christian Laettner, which I thought was well done. I was there with Christian at the premiere. There was a screening for it before it aired on TV. And, it was funny, before the film, before they aired it, one of the people from the 30 for 30 from ESPN came on, got in front of the screen and was talking via microphone and said, when we first did it and they first brought back to us the film, the first cut, they thought it was too nice. And it painted too good a picture of him. And so they went back and then they ended up coming up with the film. And so if you recall, they ended up getting, various people who had nothing to do with our team to sort of, interject. I think Paul Rosenberg was one of them, talking about how they hated Christian and this and that. And I think they added certain elements to it to sort of support this angle they wanted. I know they sat with me for 3 hours and they only took those little bits and pieces where I kind of oh yeah, he was a jerk, certain things that I said, but they didn't tell the full story. And one of the great stories, and it happened in Buffalo, the only time that I've been to Buffalo, we were, it was 1992, and we were going in town to play Canisius at the Aud. And back then, Coach K would always schedule at least one game during the players' 4 years in their hometown. And so we come in as back-to-back champions. We land at the airport, before 9/11, obviously. So the airport's crowded. The mayor's there. He gives us a key to the city, right at the gate to Christian. Camera, it was just it was a mob scene. And so we go out. We're number one in the country. Christian's, obviously a Player of the Year candidate. And in the first half, he takes 2 shots. And at halftime, coach, we're blowing Canisius out. But at halftime, coach is, it's like, hey, Christian, you're not really looking to score. And Christian's like, hey, I want to show my hometown how good my teammates are. And and so we're all like, okay, we can get our averages up now. We can go out here. But that's the side that people didn't always see. And so, yeah, on the court, in between the lines, he was competitive. Yeah, he talked trash, and he would come over and say something to you if you weren't playing. But I'll tell you what, when I made dunks or great plays that I had during my time there, nobody celebrated greater and was more excited for me than him. And so anyway, it's just interesting. I don't feel like the full picture was really accurately told about Christian. He was a great teammate. And most of my memories and experiences at Duke those 2 years were with him, hanging out with him and spending, the locker room and all of that. Now, he had a side to him that was only Christian, but so I would always get in the foxhole with him. And but I do think that you have to be able to compete. You have to really want to get after it. And I was at a certain level in the NBA, and I'm a good person, nice guy, I get along with people. But when we got between those lines, we're competing, and we're trying to win, and you're trying to do whatever you can to be successful. And Christian was one of the best, and Jordan. I think Jordan was, obviously his competitiveness is what separated him. Christian had a real competitiveness those 2 years that we played together in Detroit. everything was a competition, and he had to win at everything. And unfortunately for us, he was good at almost everything.
Christian Laettner, one of the 2 or 3 best players to ever come out of Western New York after Bob Lanier. Another player in that discussion, Cliff Robinson. What do you remember about competing against him and being in the NBA around the same era as Cliff Robinson?
Yeah, no, Cliff was a great player and a great person. I mean, he was one of the guys, and that I've always said that I had the hardest time competing against. He guarded me, and you'd think he was a big guy, but he could really slide his feet. He was really smart. He was obviously taller than me, and he just gave me a lot of problems. And I could, so he was somebody in my Detroit days that I struggled with. Like, I struggled trying to figure out how to beat him. And he was one of the toughest guys for me to go against in that regard. But just a great guy. Everybody who's played with him thought the world of him. And just so unfortunate, so sad that he passed away. But certainly someone that all of us who played with and against him certainly remember and think the world of.
Grant, last question for you. I wanted to revisit, I guess, a month and a half or so ago when there were a few days where we weren't even sure if we would make it to the NBA Finals. Players went on strike. Some prominent voices seemed ready to end the postseason entirely after the Jacob Blake shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and all sports, all the leagues were shut down briefly. So I wanted to ask you this, as someone with a unique perspective as a former player, Atlanta Hawks co-owner, someone who double majored in political science and history at Duke, someone who has a long history of raising money for community projects. Those prominent voices and league executives got back to work pretty quickly after making their point. And there's potentially more unrest looming. What do you think the sports world's true appetite is for wanting to force change?
That's a good question. I don't know if I can speak on behalf of the entire sports world because I don't know sort of the NFL. I'm not in that. I'm not in Major League Baseball and other sports, but I'm in basketball, and I live in that space. I work in it. I have ownership and roles as the vice chairman of the Atlanta Hawks. So I have seen it, experienced it, lived it in a number of different ways in the world of basketball. And I include the WNBA in that as well. And, I think athletes today, NBA athletes today, I think are very outspoken and understand the power of their voice and understand that, or feel as though they have a purpose that comes with, and a responsibility that comes with, being an athlete and being an NBA athlete. I think a lot of it started with Trayvon Martin in 2012, when you saw players using social media to sort of protest and post pictures about wearing a hoodie and then all the other incidents that have happened since then. I think NBA athletes have found their voice, and there's a willingness and a desire to exercise and speak out on things. And obviously all of that really intensified this summer. Moving forward, I don't know. I don't know what will happen. I mean, I don't know what the next 6 months, next 12 months look like. But I do think that players, that was an important issue for them coming off the heels of George Floyd, to have a platform and a way to shed light and shine the spotlight on some of these injustices. And so, I think, I don't think that alone makes changes, but I do think, I think if anything good has come out of all of this is that people now, we're no longer in denial on certain things. And I think we're more willing to speak with one another and listen to one another. And really, I think, try to understand each other and understand some of, what plagues us. And I think that's part of the process, is if you can get people to talk to one another, listen and share, and do it in a non-judgmental way, then that's how you can affect change. And so, I don't know what the future looks like in that regard and the role that sports will play. But I am proud that the NBA, as players, as a league, have really been outspoken and certainly trying to do their part to move the needle.
Grant Hill, Hall of Famer, 7-time All-Star, part owner of the Atlanta Hawks, et cetera, NBA analyst for Turner Sports. What else do we want to add in there, Grant? Any initiatives you're working with now that you want to plug?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Actually, you talk about documentary. We just completed an incredible documentary called A Most Beautiful Thing, and it's about an all-black inner-city Chicago rowing team, West Side Chicago, in a gang-infested neighborhood. It was back in the 90s. And it was just a powerful story. These young men reconnect, they get back in the boat, they train, but their story, the trauma they faced growing up, being, in rival gangs, and then this sport that we associate with privilege and wealth was introduced, and how this sport really kind of changed their lives and gave them, this sort of a foundation of success that they've been able to carry with them, into adult life. And so it's out right now on the Peacock platform, and it's called A Most Beautiful Thing, and it's gotten some great reviews and write-ups. So, and it's an important story, particularly with all that we've gone through as a country this year. This message and this story is extremely timely.
100% score on Rotten Tomatoes, which doesn't happen often. That's incredible feedback right there. Yeah, check that out on Peacock. We have that here at home, and I'll be watching it tonight.
All right. Well, good stuff. No, it's a great story, and I appreciate you giving me a chance to plug it.
Well, Grant, thanks so much for joining us. You've been very generous with your time. I know you're a busy fella, and I want to wish you the best for the rest of 2020 and into 2021. And again, thanks for joining us.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys.
All right. Take care. That's Grant Hill.